I'm Greg Patent, and welcome to my kitchen. On today's show, I'll be using the food processor to make 4 great potato dishes, including this dish of Mexican-style potatoes and cheese with green chilies, potato pancakes that you can serve anytime, a terrific potato salad made with a vinaigrette instead of mayonnaise, and finally, baked stuffed potatoes stuffed with ham and cheese. Potatoes are a wonderful source of protein and good nutrition in general. The first recipe I'm going to make is called Mexican-style potatoes and cheese, but before I begin, I want to say a little bit about the kinds of potatoes you can buy. There are basically 2 kinds that you find in supermarkets, baking potato and boiling potatoes, and I have examples of them down here. The baking potato has a brown skin. It's your typical Idaho potato. It has a mealy texture, and it's good for potato salads and for French fries and for mashed potatoes. And then next to it, I have 2 kinds of boiling potatoes, a yellow-skinned variety and also a red-skinned varieties. Now these potatoes, the boiling potatoes, have a waxy consistency, and they are really, really excellent for salads and also for scalloped potatoes and the Mexican-style potatoes and cheese that I'll be making. You'll need 1.5 pounds of these boiling potatoes, and I have them peeled here, all ready to go when we get ready to slice them. But before I slice them, I want to prepare some of the dry ingredients that go into the recipe first. And in this case, it's 1.5 ounces of Parmesan cheese. So with the metal blade of your food processor in place, start the motor, drop the cheese through the feed tube. It'll make a slight noise, and then let it process until the cheese is finely chopped. And then you remove the cheese from the work bowl. And this is not terribly fine because I do want some texture in the cheese. So if you have some large pieces, that's perfectly okay. And then we're going to process the cheddar. And whenever you're going to shred cheese, make sure that the cheese is very cold. So if you have a semi-soft cheese that is kind of squishy to the feel, put it in the freezer for about 10 minutes, and then use almost no pressure on the pusher. Very light pressure. And then we'll empty that from the work bowl and set it aside until later. The thing about processor cooking is that you usually do things in a stepwise fashion, getting them all out of the way, and then you have a chance to assemble your ingredients at the very end. Then we are going to switch over from the shredder to the 2mm slicing disc, which is the thin slicing disc. And use this to slice a medium onion. Put the onion in the feed tube, and if it won't go in vertically, you can put it in horizontally. It doesn't matter for this recipe. Use medium pressure. And then the onion gets turned out of the work bowl. And to the onion, I'm going to add a 4-ounce can, drained, of diced green chilies. And you can use the hot chili or the mild chili according to your taste. But this adds a wonderful piquancy to this terrific dish. Then put the 2mm slicer back in the work bowl, and one by one process these potatoes. And I'm putting them in horizontally because I like to get these nice, long, complete potato slices. And use firm pressure to process potatoes, and you'll find that 1.5 pounds of potatoes will probably take you about 30 seconds of processing time. You'll get perfectly even slices, much more even than you could get with a knife, and certainly much more quickly than you could get with a knife. So those are all the prep steps involved. I'm going to leave the potatoes right here and then go on to assemble the dish. I have a 12 by 8-inch rectangular baking dish. What you need is a 2-quart casserole. It can be round or rectangular. Lightly butter it with melted butter, and then take your potatoes, about 1/3 of your potatoes, and then layer them in, overlapping them slightly. I just want to show you what marvelous slices you get with this 2mm slicing disc. And then you put about 1/3 of these potatoes in. I'm going to do this whole layering process for you, just so that I make sure that you know what to do. And after the potatoes are layered, then we'll sprinkle with about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, So just a light sprinkling of salt, and also a light grinding of pepper, according to taste. I like a lot of pepper. About half of the cheddar cheese. It was a 6-ounce chunk of cheddar, by the way, in case I forgot to say. Half the chili onion mixture, and then just spread that over. And then we'll continue layering with another third of the potatoes. And this kind of dish, by the way, is excellent to serve with grilled meats, such as a hamburger or a steak, or also roasted chicken. And you can vary the cheese according to taste. In this case, I use cheddar, but you can use Monterey Jack if you want, or even Fontina. Sprinkle again with a little bit of salt, a grinding of pepper, the rest of the cheddar cheese, and the rest of the chilies, the chili and onion mixture. And this is kind of like a scalloped potato, except in this case it doesn't have egg in it and doesn't have a lot of cream. There will be some. And then just top with the rest of the potatoes, and we're just about done. Once the potatoes are all on top, I'm going to dot the top with some butter and also sprinkle it with the Parmesan cheese that we processed earlier. And you see how fast this dish can go together. The processing takes you just a few seconds, and then the assembly also takes you literally just a few seconds. So there we are. Put the Parmesan on top. And these chunks of Parmesan will melt and give a beautiful golden color to this dish. And then sprinkle it with bits of melted, pardon me, not melted butter, but 2 tablespoons of butter that you've cut into little pieces just to dot the top. And then you pour over all of this only 1/2 cup of heavy cream. And then you get this into the center of a 375-degree oven, and you bake it for about 40 minutes until it's all bubbly and the top is browned. And then you let it set for about 5 to 10 minutes, cut it into squares, 6 to 8 servings, and then enjoy. Potato pancakes are a side dish that go with practically anything. They go with fish, meat patties, chicken, and the potato is one of the most nutritious of all vegetables. It is high in protein, high in carbohydrate, and very low in fat. And there's really only one important thing to remember with potato pancakes, and that's the kind of potato to use. And the kind I like to use is a baking potato, or an Idaho potato. They're these brown-skinned potatoes that you can find everywhere. They have a mealy consistency. They're great for French fries. They're also great for mashed potatoes, and they are terrific for potato pancakes. One of the reasons it's so good, this kind of potato is so good, is because it's got a high starch content. And we're going to take advantage of that high starch content to hold the pancakes together as they cook. So you'll need 2 pounds of these baking potatoes. Now, you can peel them, or you can not peel them. It depends on your tastes. In this case, I'm peeling the potatoes, and you soak them whole in cold water so that their starch is not leached out. And then when you want to cook them, you just turn them out onto a towel and pat them dry. And the processor does such a quick job of shredding these potatoes that it'll take you maybe about 10 to 15 minutes from the time you actually start making this dish until you actually can have the potatoes on your plate ready to eat. So I have 2 pounds of baking potatoes that I'm going to process with the medium shredding disc, and I'm going to use hard or firm pressure and process the potatoes one right after the other. That's why I say it's a very, very fast dish to make. There, and they're all done. And once they're done, you turn them into a mixing bowl. And you can scrape the work bowl just to make sure that we get all of the potato out. And then to season the potatoes and to also help to hold them together and to give a little bit more nutrition, use the metal blade to process 2 large eggs, 2 tablespoons of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then 2 tablespoons of chives, which can be the freeze-dried variety or they can be the fresh snipped variety. Process for just a few seconds, just to combine everything together well. And then that's all there is to it. You take the metal blade of the processor out, set it aside, and then just scrape this work bowl clean, getting this mixture all out and into the potatoes. And you want to be sure when you are making this dish that you do not shred your potatoes until you are actually ready to turn them into pancakes, because potatoes have this nasty habit of turning a dark color on you. And it's not always predictable. Sometimes they will turn dark and sometimes they will not turn dark. That's why I like to soak the potatoes while they're whole in cold water. And that way, as I said earlier, the starch will not get leached out. Then you heat 2 tablespoons of oil and 2 tablespoons of butter in a large skillet, about a 12-inch skillet over medium heat, and you scoop out about a half cup of this potato mixture for each pancake. Use your hands to help and get this mixture into the skillet. This will make 8 large potato pancakes, so just put little mounds right into the skillet. Press down on these mounds either with a spoon or with a spatula just to flatten them slightly. What you want is to wind up with about 8 mounds that are about 4 inches or so in diameter, and try to keep them from sticking to each other. And I'm going to rob from this one to add to this one, so I have 4 evenly sized patties. Then you cook them over medium heat for about 5 minutes until they turn a nice crispy golden brown. Flip the pancakes over. Do this carefully so they don't fall apart. You see how nice and brown and crisp, very appetizing. And then once these are done, you just repeat this procedure with the remaining potato mixture. Serve them as soon as you can. But if you can't serve them in a few minutes, then get them on a sheet and then reheat them in the oven. When you're ready to serve, just get them on a platter and decorate with parsley, and this will make 8 potato pancakes. The potato salad I'm going to make is one that you can serve warm or at room temperature, and it has a vinaigrette dressing flavored with mustard instead of the typical mayonnaise. I think the most important thing to remember when you make a potato salad is the kind of potato to use. What I'm going to be using are these red-skinned boiling potatoes. You should buy them whenever they're in season, wash them well, and leave the peel on. And I'll show you how to prepare them in a really neat new way for the food processor. To start off, I'll use the metal blade to chop 3 hard-cooked eggs, and this will take just a few pulses. You don't want to overdo it. I think just about 2 seconds with the processor chops eggs for you. And then we'll take the metal blade out and then just empty the work bowl. We don't have to clean the work bowl. Then put in the 2mm slicing disc, reassemble the machine, and slice 3 large scallions that you have trimmed into 3-inch lengths, and then just stuff them right down into the feed tube so that they stand upright vertically, and then use medium pressure to process. And then we'll empty these scallions, and we'll set these aside until later, because we don't want to add them to the potatoes right away. Also, get ready 3 large celery ribs and trim them into 3-inch lengths, and also stand them upright in the feed tube so that they won't tip over. And just wedge them over to one side and use a light to medium pressure to process. And if you have a few of the celery leaves sticking to the celery ribs, that's great because it gives flavor. And that's how quickly it is to slice celery. Then we'll empty this into a large mixing bowl, and we'll just leave this there for now. And then let me show you how to do the potatoes. We're going to use the French fry disc to cut the potatoes. And we're not making French fries with this. We're going to be making a potato salad with it, but you'll see that this disc does a beautiful job of cutting potatoes into lovely strips. So we put as many potatoes as can fit the feed tube at one time. You need 2 pounds for this recipe. And use firm pressure to process. And potatoes are a hard vegetable, and so just be sure you exert the right amount of pressure. Don't be timid about this. And if the potatoes want to fight back at you, just keep pushing. And within a few seconds, we've processed 2 pounds of potatoes. And let me show you what they look like. You have beautiful strips here, you see. And since we haven't cut the peel off, each strip of potato has a slight pink color from the red skin. Then you want to get a large pot of water to the boil. I have about 6 quarts of water boiling here. You dump the potatoes in, stir everything up, bring the pot back to the boil, and in about 3 minutes the potatoes should be done. You want to be sure to test them carefully. Taste them, make sure that they're done, and then when they're done, drain them really well. Turn the hot potatoes right over the celery in the large mixing bowl, and then add 1/4 cup of dry white vermouth and the prepared scallions, and then you want to fold this together to make sure that the potatoes get to imbibe that vermouth. And if you want your potato salad to really pick up a lot of flavor, make sure that you season it while it is hot or warm, because the potatoes pick up a lot more flavor that way than when they're cold. And we'll just let this sit while we make the vinaigrette dressing. So with the metal blade in place, add 1/2 cup of oil to the work bowl. And this is just plain safflower or sunflower oil. If you want, you can substitute part olive oil. Add a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a tablespoon of lemon juice, and a tablespoon of red wine vinegar. 1/2 teaspoon of oregano and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, again leaving the salt out if you desire. And then a generous grinding of freshly ground black pepper, about 1/4 of a teaspoon. And then process this for just a few seconds, and you have a vinaigrette. Now you should let the potatoes sit with the vermouth and the scallions for about 15 minutes before adding the vinaigrette. And then to pour the vinaigrette over the potatoes, secure the blade in place from below so the blade does not fall out. And then pour this nice, spicy dressing over it. Add the egg yolk, and then you just simply fold everything together. And that's all it takes to make this potato salad. As I said earlier, you can eat this when it's hot or when it's warm. Turn it into a serving dish. Garnish with some sliced hard-cooked egg and some tomato wedges, and then serve it just as soon as you can. And this will make 8 to 10 servings. This baked stuffed potatoes with ham and cheese is substantial enough to serve as a main course with a light salad, or you may choose to serve it with a side dish and a light main course. For the recipe, you will need 3 large baking potatoes, meaning that they should be at least 8 ounces in weight. You cut it in half. You cut the potatoes in half the long way with a heavy knife, and we're going to prepare them in a way that they'll bake very quickly. So you take the tip of a sharp knife and you make a crosshatch pattern, as I'm doing here, going in about 1/4 inch into the flesh. And what this does is hasten the cooking. So what we'll need to do is just simply brush these potato halves with a little bit of oil, just a light brushing of oil, and then turn them upside down on a lightly oiled baking sheet and get them into a preheated 400-degree oven. And then you'll want to bake them for just about 30 minutes or until they're tender. So be sure that you test them. And then when they're done, you just take them out of the oven, let them cool slightly until they're cool enough to handle, and then you just scoop out the centers, as I've done here, as you can see. Scoop out the centers, leaving almost a 1/2 inch of shell all the way around, because you do want these potatoes to hold their shape. And then you just simply reserve the pulp in another bowl. We're going to be using this pulp in the recipe. This is a great recipe to do ahead of time, because you can stuff the potatoes ahead, bake them hours later, or you can actually freeze them. And I'll tell you how to bake them if you freeze them first. And everything gets mixed up in the work bowl, practically all at one time. So with a metal blade in place, you start the motor, and you want to drop through the feed tube 2 large scallions that you've cut into 1-inch pieces. And the food processor then does just a terrific job of mincing these scallions in just a few seconds. Take 4 ounces of ham, cut it into 1-inch cubes, and then let this run for about 10 or 15 seconds until the ham is finely chopped. And then we'll take the metal blade out and scrape the work bowl so that we can see what's going on inside it. This is now a very finely minced mixture. And then put the medium shredding disc in place. Take 4 ounces of extra sharp cheddar cheese. This dish has some real nice bite to it. And make sure the cheese is well chilled and use almost no pressure to process. The only time you actually have to exert any pressure on the pusher when you're doing cheese is if the cheese tends to fight back at you a little bit. And then what I want to do is to load the pulp. This potato pulp, we can just put that right into this large feed tube, and we're going to process this, again, with practically no pressure. There. And then we'll take the shredder out, and then put the metal blade back in again, and make sure that whenever you're doing this maneuver, switching from one disc back to the metal blade, that you make sure that the blade is securely on the bottom of the work bowl. And then add 1/3 cup of sour cream. 1/3 cup does not have that many calories, so I wouldn't be concerned. But if you are concerned, you can substitute 1/3 cup of yogurt. And a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and about a 1/2 teaspoon or a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, depending upon taste, and of course you could leave it out. And also a big pinch of cayenne pepper, because we want this to have some bite to it. And then, this is an important part, we want to combine everything together. So you pulse very quickly about 4 times, and then you scrape the work bowl just to make sure that the sour cream gets combined with all the other ingredients. Just use this plastic scraper to mix everything up together well. And then pulse once or twice more. And you don't want to overdo it, because you can turn your potato mixture into glue. So you take this mixture and you can stuff it into your potato halves with spoons, as I'm doing here. And you want to mound it high. This thing wants to kind of get away from me. That's one way of doing it. Or, if you're more adventurous and you want to experiment with a plastic bag, a pastry bag, get a pastry bag situated, as I've done here, with a large star tip, and put your potato mixture right into the bag. And I'm just going to do some of this, and just pipe it through in a pretty star pattern. I'm going to do just a couple of these. And I want to tell you that you bake these at 400 degrees, see how pretty that is, for just about 20 minutes until they're hot. And if you want to freeze them before baking, and then when you want to bake them, get them on a baking sheet and bake them in a 325-degree oven for about 45 minutes, or until they're piping hot. And then you serve these either by themselves or with a main course, and this will make 6 baked potato halves. So that's how you make those 4 great potato dishes with your food processor. The Mexican-style potatoes with chili and cheese, the potato pancakes, good anytime with anything, and the potato salad vinaigrette, and finally, the baked potatoes with ham and cheese. This is Greg Patent wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.